Hello, this is Gretchen the Verdant Crafter. Today I'm going to show you 10 cards I made using the SSS Stamp Halloween 2017 Special Edition Kit. First we have a 12 by 12 sheet of stickers. These are holographic and they're super cute. They actually came packaged separately from the rest of the kit, which was fine. Here is the container, the bag that held the rest of the supplies. We have some regular glow-in-the-dark Wow embossing powder. We have these cute mini containers of Nuvo glow-in-the-dark drops, and here you can see how they glow. I also have a large container of the Nuvo glow-in-the-dark drops in green apple. Here are some Braddies that came from Doodlebug. Here's some super nice twine from Tim Holtz. This is the stamp set. It's incredibly adorable. These are some pockets for candy or whatever you want to put in them. I actually didn't end up using them. Here is my favorite part. It's a little die that cuts out the cat perfectly. Some googly eyes, which I didn't use here, but I did use in a card right after that's not recorded. And that's a container for candy. Here are some Pebbles 3D squishy stickers. Here are 3 pieces of Pebbles paper. I love the cat paper and I didn't even use it. Here is some foiled tape from Tim Holtz. And these are bugle beads and seed beads that are in spooky Halloween colors. And here are some Tim Holtz papers. These have a nice texture and they have a craft background. They are a bit shiny, but the texture makes them so much fun. I have been putting these in and out of my cart so many times. And we have 2 A2 size pieces of white and black paper from SSS Stamp. So I cut down a black piece of paper to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I cut a circle, and here I am just using a sponge dauber, so a distress ink blender, and some peeled paint, distress oxide ink, to get a bottom grassy area inked. I did use Post-it tape to tape off sort of the horizon. I'm also using some chipped sapphire to darken it up and make it less bright. I'm going to peel off my piece of Post-it tape and lay it back down so that I can blend the sky in sort of a purpley, a purple color. So I believe that I used Wilted Violet. I might have used Seedless Preserves, Distress Oxide ink, and again, some more of the chipped sapphire. The paper that I'm working on right now is 4 1/4 by, 4 by 5 1/2. 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. There we go. Sorry, the camera is shaking there. And here again, I'm darkening it and I'm adding a little bit more dimension using the chipped sapphire on the Wilted Violet or Seedless Preserves. Sorry, I don't remember. I stick my sponge daubers to the back of my containers using little Velcro tabs. Here I'm peeling it off, and I am going to use one of the sponge daubers to sort of blend the colors a little bit more because I felt like that line was a little bit too harsh. And I don't mind it being harsh-ish, but I didn't want it that harsh. And I'm using my fingers just a little bit to blend it out some more. Okay. I am going to use my Distress Ink Sprayer, and I'm going to dry that. It'll just add a little bit more dimension. Fun fact, if you are a quilter and do any paper piecing, it is very easy to use your Distress Ink Sprayer to wet the paper piecing down to peel it off better. I discovered that this weekend when my mom, who's a quilter, came to visit and needed a water bottle. A spray bottle. Now, I will say that when you initially do this, the spots are very bright white, but I feel like over time they sort of deepen and become less dominant. Okay, so here we go, and I do have this circle that I cut. You can see that I didn't go far enough over with the purple Distress Oxide ink, but that's okay. I'm going to end up putting a little tombstone over it, so no one will ever see. I'm going to use some foam tape to pop up this black panel. Whatever foam tape you have is good to use. I'm using up random pieces that I found in my move. So here I'm just putting it down. I want it to be lined up perfectly so that you don't really see the white paper. But if it's not, you can always use your paper trimmer or a pair of scissors to trim things down. Here I'm peeling off the holographic skeleton. He's super cute and he's a little creepy, but the holographic part makes him very fun. I put him down, and now I'm just going to use some foam tape on the back of 2 headstones, and I will use my anti-static powder tool to remove the stick just in case these get pressed down too much in the mail, if I send these in the mail. And I will also use some glue where they're touching the popped up black paper. Because I'm using the same foam tape, I know that both the headstones and the black panel are being popped up the same amount, so I don't have to worry about them being uneven. Of course, if your black panel is too thick, then you might have to worry, but for regular paper you shouldn't. Here I have my headstones, they're popped up, and I believe that I'm going to add some silver stickles from Ranger. Oh, here we go with our sentiment. I figured I'd go with the holographic theme and put down the Happy Halloween sentiment. These did have a little bit, I feel like the cut on these stickers was a little bit off, because on the bottom and one edge you could see the other color from the stickers. I just trimmed that off, and now I'm lining it up and sticking it down. And here I am just adding some stickles. One of the nice things is, because the stickles are water-based and because the Distress Oxides are water-based, as they dry, the colors are also going to meld. So I sort of have these pink purple stickles. The glitter is still silver, but the other color from the stickle is pinkish purple, which I think is just fun. Here I'm trimming off some of the white paper because I really don't want it showing. I am using a black card base, and I did put a piece of white paper inside, but you don't see that. It is because these are A2 size cards. The inside paper is 4 by 5¼ inches. We're moving right on to card number 2. I really like this card. The only thing I didn't like was when I did my heat embossing, I really warped the paper. So I am using from a Simon Says Stamp Autumn's Greeting stamp set, the Happy Halloween. I really wanted a big Happy Halloween to dominate this card. While the stamp set that comes in the kit says Happy Meowloween or something like that, I didn't feel like it was big enough and it didn't quite fit what I wanted. I'm using some white embossing powder and I'm just heat setting that. Again, I feel like I got my heat tool too close for too long to the paper because it did warp quite a bit at the top edge. I am using some glue to stick this down onto a black piece of paper that is 4¼ by 5½ inches. This dotted orange paper from Tin Holtz is 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I'm just pressing that down under my craft mat. I mounted that on an A2 size piece, an A2 card base top folding. And here is one of those puffy stickers. I felt like it didn't pop enough against the black background, so I cut a circle from black cardstock. I put the sticker on, and now I'm just going to glue it onto my card base. I did play a little with it. I had originally planned to put it in the middle of the card base, but I felt like it looked better, more balanced on the side. We're also going to add the 2 puffy stickers that are bats. They're super cute. I like how they have pink cheeks. This was an incredibly simple card, but I think it's very effective. It's very graphic, and it certainly is very fun. Moving on to card number 3. This card I actually made twice. And I made it twice because the first time when I was almost at the end, I messed up. So we made it a little bit more effectively this time. I put down the little bat and I'm stamping him with VersaFine ink on an A2 size piece of paper. And you can see I drew a circle on it. I actually had a piece of black paper that is 4 by 5 1/4 cut out, and I die cut a circle from it using one of my Hero Arts Infinity circle dies. And I laid it on and traced it. Here I'm just cleaning off my stamp very well before I'm positioning the bats. I wanted a very, very black impression. I also, and you didn't see this of course, used anti-static powder tool very, very liberally because I'm going to use black embossing powder. I wasn't sure how well it would work and I was crossing my fingers. I did use Ranger's black embossing powder. It worked pretty well. I did have to use something to brush off the excess, but we do have black embossed with black embossing powder bats. Here I am laying down the larger piece of paper. I have used anti-static powder tool on it liberally, and you're going to see that I'm using micropore tape to tape it down so that it doesn't shift. Now I love that I have my Misty for this because I'm going to line the bats up perfectly and I'm going to be able to stamp so that the wings aren't just in the moon, which is what this is going to become. They're also on the black paper, and because they're black embossed, they have a shiny texture on the matte paper texture. Okay, I am once again going to be using VersaFine ink because it is so black and it is so pigmented. And you know, once again, I'm going to get all my stamping right until I get to the last bat and the last impression when things are going to go a little wonky, but I decided to just keep going. And you may be wondering, well, aren't you stamping on top of where you embossed? I am, and that's okay. I am going to heat set the background as well as the foreground. And you will see that I'm going to have a little bit of smudging from the VersaFine ink, but it will be okay. It just adds a little bit to the spookiness. Between each bat, I made sure to clean my stamp incredibly well. I didn't want to have any little dabs on the outside. And there you can see that one of the impressions wasn't quite perfect. Here I'm just adding my anti-static powder, my black embossing powder, and I am heat setting it. I am reheat setting my stamped impression to dry the VersaFine ink and to make sure everything's nice and even. Here I'm using a Swiffer dusting cloth, which is removing the anti-static powder tool. And you can see that my moon is getting a little bit messy, but that's okay. I ran the edge of my Distress Oxide ink, Spiced Marmalade, along the edge of the paper, and then I did use my sponge dauber to blend it in a little, but I wanted a very deep, bright orange. Here I'm using fossilized amber, and I'm just getting my moon. I do wish that I had used wild honey. The only reason I didn't was because I was afraid it would be too close to the Spiced Marmalade color, but I feel like fossilized amber is a little greener than I would like. It looks fine in the end, but it's not what I had visualized in my head. Here I'm just using a cloth to clean off the embossing to make sure that they're nice and bright. Okay, I did use, I'm going to call it sort of a pinked edge die to cut out a strip of paper. I made this just like I made the orange edge for the paper. So I cut it out of the orange paper that I made, and I also cut it out of the black paper. I will trim that down because I wanted to have sort of a pink and an orange and black edge along one side, the left side of the paper, this panel. Here I've mounted the panel. I've just taped it on to the, or maybe I guess I've glued it on to the panel that we created. And here I'm just using foam tape. Oh, okay. Sorry, I have a helper who is helping overly much. I am going to use a black piece of cardstock, so a black card base. So when you look at it, it's going to be black card base, and then the orange paper, which is actually the paper with my moon and my stamping, and then the black paper with the circle cut out of it. And then you can see here's the orange zigzag and then the black zigzag on top. Which sounds confusing, but I think it creates something very dynamic. It's simple, it's very classic. Here I'm putting a piece of paper that is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches inside of my A2 card base. Once again, I'm going to end up using the Happy Halloween sentiment from the Autumn Greetings. I wanted a big sentiment that very much dominated the card, but I'm going to pull those bats in and stamp them inside with some VersaFine ink. I am using VersaFine because I think it gives a great black impression, and it's usually a full impression the first time. Other black inks are fantastic, but I don't feel like they give as black of an impression. Here I'm just getting the back of my front panel some glue, and I'm going to glue that down, and we'll be able to see our beautiful, fantastic card base. There we go. Isn't it fun? Now we're moving on to card number 4. So this is actually the back of my favorite piece of paper. I really wanted to use the cats, but I felt like the other side fit what I wanted better. I've cut it down so it's 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm gluing that onto the front of an A2 black card base. Here I have a cat that I stamped, I watercolored, and then I die cut using the die that comes in the kit. I used micropore tape on the back of it because it does cut out the little nose and I wanted to keep the nose. I have that glued down with Ranger Multimedia Matte, and here I'm stamping It's Meowloween on a black strip of paper, and I'm white heat embossing it. Now there are dies that do this, but I don't have them, so I thought I'd sort of cheat and make my own. Here I have my Fiskars trimmer, and I've just put it down, so I'm trimming maybe 1/2 inch from the sentiment. I'm just eyeballing it so it's the same on each side. I think it is 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to use my bone trimmer, bone folder, sorry, to score it and to really get those folds nice. Now I'm going to unfold it, and I'm going to score again, I believe 1/4 of an inch from that spot on each side. So from my first score. And now I'm just going to fold it the opposite way. So it creates sort of a 3D panel. I'm going to fishtail the ends, and I'm going to use these teeny tiny little foam squares that I have. I don't even know what they're from or who they're from. And I don't use them often, so much so that I keep thinking I should just use these all up so that they're not there. But there are odd times like now when I find they're really helpful. Okay, just replacing my sentiment, and these are the foam squares. They're super tiny, and if you're using them all individually, they're kind of a pain to peel all of the little pieces off, but for tiny, tiny little areas like this, they're just perfect. I am going to use glue on the ends of my fishtail banner, and I believe I'm going to put a weight on them just to make sure that they stay put. I am using Multimedia Matte because it is a very strong adhesive that dries matte. A lot of glues do dry shiny, which can be distracting if the glue leaks out. Here I am with my little sentiment. I did let that dry, and now I'm coming in with these black gemstones that have stickiness on the back. These came in a Love from Lizzie card kit quite a while ago. I don't know where she got them, but I love them and I wish I had reams more of them. I especially love the dinky ones. Apparently that's a size. They're so tiny that actually in this case I've used them all up. Here I'm using my Distress Oxide Spiced Marmalade on a tag that I cut out using a Sizzix die, Sizzix Framelits die. I am going to come in with just a little bit of the red, which is Candied Apple, to sort of brighten it up and deepen it up, add a little bit more dimension. And this is part of card number 5, which, being a cat lover, is one of my favorites. Now I'm going to use black soot just along the edges, again, to give it a little bit more dimension, but also to make it look a little bit more shabby, which is going to go with the Tim Holtz paper we're going to use for the background. Here I'm blending it with the orange. I don't want the black to stand out too much. I want it to be fairly subtle. So here you can see I've made 2 orange ones, one with the red and the black and one with just orange, and one with black soot. I wasn't sure which orange tag I was going to use until I was already putting the card together. I sprayed those with my distress sprayer and then I just dried them using my heat tool. I am going to end up using the tag which has the black soot along the edges. I felt like the other one was a little bit too bright and I really needed the red and the orange to complement this paper. We're going to stamp It's Meowloween using Versamark ink, and we're going to emboss using white embossing powder. I probably should have used something like gold with this because I did use metallic watercolors to paint the buckle on the cat's hat gold. But I like the white because it's very bold. It's a graphic statement. Here are my 2 tags, and I'm going to thread a black grosgrain ribbon through them. This is just ribbon that you could get from any store that you have around. I've looped it over, and here are my 2 tags. I do want them to be offset a little, so I will use some glue to make sure they stay offset. And there's our little cat. You can see the micro pour tape. I am trimming that off. I was originally just using the micro pour tape to hold the nose in, so I didn't lose it because I did paint and die cut a bunch of these all at once. But I found it worked just fine, and why get out something else when this works? I did also go around the edge of all of my images with a black alcohol ink marker. So no white was showing, it gave them a nice finish. Here I'm using my multimedia mat to glue down my cat, and I'm also going to use it to glue down the 2 tags so they don't go anywhere. I let those dry for a while and then I used foam tape on the back. I was liberal with the foam tape, but I don't want them to get crushed in the mail. Again, this is random foam tape that happens to be in my drawer. We're using things up after a recent move that we discovered that we owned. I'm commenting there that I wish that I had dropped the sentiment down one stripey layer. I felt like it was too close to the tags. There I'm just trimming up the ends, so while they're not even, they both have the same angle. I am also going to use a glue dot to glue down my tags, the ribbon ends. I always like to try and make them appear sort of natural, but I don't like when they stick perfectly straight upward. It just bugs me. Okay. So I also decided it was too plain. I thought about using the glow-in-the-dark Nuvo drops, but I felt like the orange and the yellow and the green didn't complement it enough. So I'm using Hero Arts ombre sequins in sunshine color. These are yellow and orange in clear and in a solid color, but they have sort of, well, an ombre effect. I'm using glue dots to put down the large ones. These are just very tiny glue dots. I do have to go in with multimedia matte to put down the small sequins because the glue dots would show and collect dirt and dust, which you don't want on the front of your card. I did use a mix of the solid color yellow and orange on the front, and for the mini dots I'm using, well, whatever comes to hand, but it's a mixture of transparent and solid color. I thought about mounting that on a black piece of paper, a black card base, but I did mount it on a white card base. I felt like that helped the sentiment have more balance. Otherwise, the sentiment would be the only white part of the card. We are moving on to card number 6, and being a cat lover, this is another one of my favorite cards. I think this is a very classic Halloween card that it's just fun. So on the front piece of paper, that black piece of paper, it's 4 inches by 5.5 inches. I die cut a circle from it and I laid that onto a white A2 card base and traced a circle. You can see that I stamped Boo from the stamp set and used white embossing powder. Here I'm using candied apple, spiced marmalade, and fossilized amber once again to create sort of an ombre from red to orange to yellow where that circle is supposed to be or will be. I'm blending those colors. I love Distress Oxide inks because they do blend so well, and while it does look like a hot mess for a little while, at the end, it simply looks spectacular. My only regret is I feel like I put down too much red. I would have liked to see more orange, but you live and you learn. I am also going to take my spiced marmalade and run that along the edge of the card base so that it looks like the card base or the card is mounted on something orange. I feel like that adds some more dimension. I do use my foam dauber to sort of even out the color because I don't want it. I feel like by itself, just putting the ink down, it would take too long to dry. Here is my front. I've used lots of foam tape and I'm just going to lay that down. It's aligned to the bottom and the top, but it leaves parts on the edge showing. And here I'm using the cat from the sticker sheet. So it says Boo! I'm also using some, I think it's carved pumpkin, orange Nuvo drops. These did not come in the kit, they are separate. But they're super fun and it definitely matches the orange color on my background. We're moving on to card 7 and I'm trying my hand at creating my first galaxy background. I hope everyone has had a chance to go outside and look up at the night sky and see the Milky Way. It can be hard to identify or hard to figure out that's what you're looking at, but it's so pretty. I am using spiced marmalade, twisted citron, and wilted violet to create my background. So it does look like a hot mess, and that's okay. We are going to blend it out just a little bit, but not too much. I wanted the colors to be as deep as possible. I do wish that I had made them deeper, but it was my first time trying. If you have never tried to make a galaxy background, I do suggest you try. It's fun, it's completely different, and while it seems difficult, it's not that hard. So it's something that looks like a hot mess until it's done. Here I'm coming in with my black soot Distress Oxide ink. I did dry the background with a heat tool to make sure that everything was perfectly dry. I'm using an extra piece of paper that was actually the piece that I cut the zigzag edge from in card number 3. To hold it, I don't want any fingerprints after I've gone to all this trouble. And I am putting down my Distress Oxide ink, you can see here. You can see the orange background. Well, not the orange. You can see the green and you can see the purple very well. You can't see the orange very well, but that's okay. I am drying the backgrounds, and then I'm going to come in with my Distress Oxide spray, my Distress Ink sprayer, to add some splashes. These splashes, the water splashes, are going to fade into the background. I'm going to also add some splashes using white opaque Copic ink. Is it ink? I know it's a Copic paint, but I think they just call it opaque white. It's very, very opaque and deep. Here I'm drawing my background. There is a block, and here's the opaque white. I'm just going to water that down with some water. I'm scooping plenty up, and I'm going to use a paintbrush to flick that off the edge of my block onto the surface below. I know Amy R. of Prairie Paper Ink does this a lot, and I find that it's very helpful if you want to control where the splatter goes, versus if you're just flicking the brush or tapping it against your hand, the paint seems to go everywhere. When I'm doing it this way, the paint just seems to go down, which is nice. Here is my opaque white. I am going to dry that with my heat tool, and then I'm going to come in with my Gansai Tombi Starry Night in the silver or the pearl color, and I'm going to add some splashes again. I wanted a little bit more dimension, and I wanted a little bit more shine without being overpoweringly shiny. Here I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and I am going to end up using the little star stamp. We're using our Versamark ink, and we're going to end up heat embossing some of the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder. Now, I don't have an image that shows you this, but I can say that it does work. I very much entertained someone who came over to visit me the other day because I had just gotten my package and I was playing with the embossing powder. I was holding it up to one of the lights in my living room and then taking it away and looking at the glow. Funnily enough, I had already gotten some of the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder previously in preparation for making Halloween cards, with no clue what I would make, but just being in love with the idea. Now, because this embossing powder is more clear or transparent, you don't really see the stars. You see them a little bit. If I had wanted them to pop more, I would have heat embossed them on the white paper and then made my Starry Night, my galaxy background. Here I'm lining up my background on a piece of an A2 card base that's white, and I'm using the 3 ghosts from the sticker set. I'm thinking about what else to use, and I'm going to end up using the Boo Crew sticker. I trimmed one edge, and I'm going to fishtail an edge. On the bottom, again, I think this is where the cutting machine was off. It does have part of the holographic sticker from our first card, the Happy Halloween. But I felt like it just added to this card. I did pop up that sticker using foam tape. I wanted a little bit more dimension, and while this is a fun card, it is a very flat card. The good part about that is it could easily go through the mail, or I feel like it could easily go through the mail. Don't quote me if it doesn't. There, I'm just using my scissors to trim that down, and I'm putting it down. The other thing that I'm doing is using those awesome glow-in-the-dark Nuvo drops. I'm going to add some of the yellow, and then I'm going to add some of the green. While you can see them easily now, once they're dry, they fade into the background quite a bit more. But when you hold them to the light, which I've done, and then take them away, they definitely glow, which is super fun. As an ex-chemistry teacher turned physics teacher, well, I've taught physics for the last 2 years, but I've been mainly a chemistry teacher in my teaching career. I am absolutely fascinated by glow-in-the-dark things, by anything chemistry related, because, oh my goodness, isn't it fantastic? I am very liberal with these dots. I don't make any of them too big, but I wanted lots of glowing spots in my night sky. Now we are moving on to card number 8. This is a super fun card. So I have a white card base and 4 by 5 1/4 piece of the Tim Holtz paper. I also cut out a slightly smaller piece of white paper, and I cut out those windows with a die from Simon Says Stamp. I did use a Newton's Nook Spooky Skeletons to stamp Happy Halloween. The stamp set doesn't really, it has Happy Meowloween or whatever it is, but it doesn't have a pure Happy Halloween sentiment, which is fine, but it didn't fit what I wanted. I have put a piece of acetate on the back of those windows, and here I'm just laying down the spider stickers from the sticker sheet where I want them. It would have been smarter to lay those down before putting down the acetate, but oh well, it still works. I am going to use a few, I think it's called Witch's Brew sequins from Simon Says Stamp. I think these came out last year, and I'm going to use multimedia matte to glue a few of them down in the background. I'm going to add a few of those sequins to each window, and I won't make you watch me glue those down. The reason I glue those down is so that the beads and the sequins that I put into the window later will get caught up on them, so they won't all fall to the bottom. Here I'm putting some of the sequins in, and you can see that I used some Stampin' Up! Foam strips. They're very thin, and they're a bit taller than normal foam strips. Here I'm using the seed beads and the bugle beads that came in the kit, and boy, they create a nice shape. I'm adding some, not too many. I don't want the windows to become overpowered, and I don't want them to be all cut up and not move. There we go. And here I'm taking a huge risk, and I worried about it, but I worried about the beads getting caught underneath the foam strips more. I'm tipping over my background and putting that down. I did put foam tape on the back, and here I'm mounting it onto my card base. I'm also going to put one of the stickers down, and you can see there I put it at an odd angle, and I'm just going to use a micron pen to trace my web line up. I ended up, and you'll see in the final picture, changing the orientation of that spider so that it fits a little bit more with the web line. This would normally be card number 9, but we're going with a project. We're going to decorate this container. Unfortunately, I had a very hard time filming it because it's so large compared to this area where I film. So I did use the Tim Holtz paper, and I cut it out so these medium-sized circles fit on each side. I used a die cut circle to cut out a circle for my front panel. And I'm not showing you doing all of them because I would do one side and then let it dry and then do the next side and let it dry. What you also don't see is that I did put very tiny dots in the center, so inside it, so that the inside is not a craft background. Here is sort of the reverse of the inside. Instead of being orange with small black dots, it's black with small white dots or orange dots. And I stamped which way to the candy. That sentiment is long. I did cut it and stamp it so that it fit on the tag. Here is a piece of twine that came in the kit. I'm just tying my tag on using that twine. And I did tape that twine down on the inside of the cover of this box so that it wouldn't go anywhere. I also used some foam dots to adhere it so that it doesn't move. There's a reason I don't often tie bows on screen. I seem to struggle a lot with them. I also used a glue dot to glue down my tag so that it stays where I want it. And you can see that I glued down my little cat, and I'm gluing down one of the pumpkins that I cut out on the side. I feel like this needs something more, but I'm not sure what. And I'm also not sure who I'd give it to. We are moving on to card number 10, which is probably my favorite card. It was the one I was most excited to make, but it was also the one I knew would be the most finicky. So I decided to lay down a whole bunch of the candy stickers, but what I was originally going to do was stamp all of the different candy stamps repeatedly along the bottom and color them. I'm using a technique that Jennifer McGuire has shown. So I'm putting these down, and you can see I'm playing with them. I'm going to die cut out the word boo, B-O-O. Then I'm going to layer those boos up with some black paper in this case, so it creates a shadow, and inlay them back in. I can't remember what Jennifer McGuire has stamped the words, or sorry, what words she's done, but I do know that she's done this technique. So if you get frustrated with me because I'm not showing too much of it, please refer to her. Here I'm using an Altenew die set. It's really my only alphabet die set, and I did not want to hand cut these out. I wanted them to be pretty even, although looking at the finished card, I did get the last O a little bit crooked. I did have to send this through my die cutting machine twice because of course I only have one O. If I were doing this again, I would put a shim underneath it because I did have to do some cutting with an X-Acto knife to get all of the letters fully out. Here I'm just using some tape runner on the back, and I'm gluing that to the back of an A2 card base, which is white. Here I'm using the foam tape again. I'm going to inlay my letters, and then I'm going to inlay the parts of the letters. It would probably have been smarter doing it with glue, or doing it with glue after I had done the whole letter, but I was afraid that if I layered together 3 layers of letter and then the top layer, which is the die cut piece, I wouldn't be able to get those tiny pieces back in. So you can see underneath my hand that has the glue, I've laid in all of the different pieces, the inside pieces from those letters. Here I'm layering up 3 layers of black cardstock to create the layers for the letters, or the shadow. And oh my goodness, listening to myself talk is quite confusing. Here we're laying our completed letter back in. So when you're looking at it directly above, it just pops up a little, but when you look at it from the side, it does have the black shadow from the letters. I think this is a super fun card. Here is what was left over from the kit: my stamp set, the embossing powder, the Nouveau drops, the die, the Pratties, which I forgot about, a whole bunch of paper scraps, including the seed beads and the googly eyes, these puffy stickers, the regular stickers, the twine. I used a little bit of it, but I didn't use any of the black sparkly twine. And here's some more full pieces of paper. I didn't use the shiny silver paper at all, but I think it would be great to use with alcohol inks to create a fun Halloween background. Here is the box completed, and I'm going to put that to the side because it does take up a lot of room. Here is one of the cards. It says Happy Halloween. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this. I am going to try uploading it with a different setting to see if that helps with the blurriness. I know it doesn't help you, but when I'm editing it on my computer, it doesn't have any blurriness. I was hoping that originally the blurriness was just some people's computers, but it's clearly not. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some great ideas. This was a very fun kit. I don't think you need everything from this kit to create fantastic cards. Certainly take these ideas and use them as you see fit, as they help you. I hope that you have a great October, and I hope that you have a fantastic Halloween. Thank you for listening. Bye.